welcome to everybody thank you for joining us for analyzing the SAS interim results using PerformancePLUS. I am Heather Jenkins, and Ann Mordecai is on here as well, so we appreciate you coming.
Hi. Okay. So ready?
Sure.
All right. Well, welcome to the webinar about analyzing SAS interim results using PerformancePLUS. This is both of us. You can see us in your little picture, and you can see us here, and I put our little emojis down there. Sorry, Heather, I had to do it. I'm going to turn off my picture now that you've seen us, just because it's distracting to me. This is the agenda for the day. We're going to first, I'm going to do an introduction, but then we're going to look at data and the standards and how the data is laid out related to the standards, which is really the important part about looking at this SAS data. Then we'll look at some high-level reports. We'll dig into the details, and then I'll show you how to create some reports. If there's time, we'll go live. I actually made the whole presentation with the steps to create reports so that you would have a record of it. But we can also go live if there's time, or we can stay after and do it. And then we'll wrap up. So starting off with introduction, I think most of you, oh, actually, I want to do the poll, don't I? Yes, poll.
Yes, and then if we could also remind folks to put any of the questions that they have in the Q&A rather than the chat. I will be monitoring the Q&A as we go through, so any questions can go there, and I'll be sure to get those to Ann.
Thank you, Heather. I always forget that. So people are taking the poll. So far, we're just on to learn how to use the interim for instruction and create reports, get an overview, see how it's different. So we're getting no others yet. That's great, because these are the things I was going to cover. And learning how to use the interim, looks like pretty much everybody has answered. So learning how to use the interim data for instruction was number one. So that's good. We'll focus on that towards the end. We're going to get an overview, a few more piling up. But okay, thank you very much for answering that. So PerformancePLUS, as some of you know, I'm sure, is many things, and it's a data storage tool, so you can put tons of data out there, all assessment data, student data, teacher data, all sorts of data. It houses assessment data from national assessments like NEWA or nationally scored, normed, like NEWA, I can't even think of any others, iReady, things like that. It houses the state data. And it also can house your local data, which is very powerful to put your own assessments out there, collect the data and put it out there, and then you have it. And you can look at it to inform instruction. You can compare it year to year. It's a reporting tool, which is what we're mostly going to be looking at today. It's also a database of questions. There are thousands and thousands of questions out there, some from SAS, some from SBAC, some local ones. I wrote some that are out there, so be careful when you grab them. But I'm not going to go over that today either, but we will be doing that in future PerformancePLUS webinars. But it's a great place to find questions. And there's also a place for intervention and individual learning plan to keep those for students and look back over the years, so you're not repeating the same interventions that worked or didn't work for students. So that's overall what PLUS is. Today we're going to talk about the data for the fall interim assessments that everyone took. And as you know, there was an ELA test and a math test for grades 3 through 7, but it was for students grades 4 through 8. So I think we all already know that. Today, the goal is to look at the essay information and how it relates to the standards, because that really is important. If you want to focus on teaching the standards, and you want to look at the data based on the standards. We're going to look at some different reports that you can see, where you can see your SAS results and how you can use them. So how to use the information for instruction. And I'm going to show you how to create some reports, which is, if you've ever tried it before, sometimes it can be very frustrating, I know, but hopefully we'll make it a little easier. So the data and the standards, you probably already know this. There are some parts of this that I kind of think people already know, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to go through them a little bit faster, but I never know for sure. So there's the hierarchy of the ELA standards, and there's, you get a subject. Then there are these domains: literary text, informational text, language, speaking and listening, and writing. Underneath each of these domains are some clusters. I'll show you the standards report, the standards document in a second. And then each cluster has standards under it. So that's the hierarchy, and it's the same for math. It's just, they're just a few fewer. So operations for 3 through 5. It actually is K through 5, but the SAS is only 3 through 5, and then 3 through 8. So the operations and algebraic thinking with clusters underneath and standard underneath that. Numbers in base 10 and fractions, they put together. Measurement and data and geometry. No, actually, this is wrong. Number as base 10 and fractions are separate. I'm sorry. This was an old slide, I guess. Measurement and data and geometry is together for 3 through 5. 6 through 8, it's got the domain on the top. Different 6, 7, and 8 all have different domains in different orders. They each have a bunch of clusters underneath them and some standards underneath that. So if you look at this document, this is a sample of a reading standards for literature for K through 5. So it's the subject is reading, or ELA. The domain is reading standards for literature. This is a hierarchy. So here's the domain. These are clusters underneath the domain. And then these are standards underneath those. So that's, you need to know this. It's also the same for math. Domain, clusters, and standards. So the report, you're going to want to know what your students did well in and what they didn't do well in. If you look at the information on the portal from the interims, you can get information on how the students did on the domains. So a domain could have 10 standards in it. So if your students did well or poorly on a certain domain, you don't know which standards, and they're very different. So it helps to dig down a little bit more, and in P+ you can do that. So the domains for ELA are these: mostly reading informational text, reading literature, and writing are the main standards that we concentrate on. For math, it's these: 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade. I mean, you can read these on your own, so I'm not going to read them. This is the 4th grade math, a page from the 4th grade standards. I don't know how many people actually have the standards document, but when you're looking at data, if you're looking at assessment data, you should have the data, the standards, and the assessment in front of you. Because without the standards, you don't really know what it is you're supposed to be teaching or have taught. Operations and algebraic thinking is for 4th grade OA, operations and algebraic thinking. So I'm going to show you the naming convention. So there's one cluster. These are all the clusters you can see. And this is what they're called for OAA on the reports: for AOB, C, A, and B. And actually they're called this in the standards. Like if you go to corestandards.org, where you can find this document, this is the way they're called: OA, operations and algebraic thinking, numbers in base 10. And it goes ABC for each cluster, except in P+, oh, it's not supposed to do all that again. It goes A, B, C, D, E. And you have to, when you're looking at a report, you have to go back to this. So it will make sense in a second. You want to know that E, NBTE, is this cluster. So we'll work forward and you'll figure out how that makes sense. So let's first look at a high-level report. I'm not going to show you how to make it yet, but just look at one. So this report, you're comparing achievement by achievement on a, not by standards, you're doing it by achievement. So this is the overall ELA score for whatever school this was. Blue is level 4, so there were 8% of the students were level 4. 45 or 44 were level 3, level 2, and level 1. And then when you look down here, you're looking at the domains. So, I mean, the clusters. The domain for this is reading literature, RL. This is RI. So the cluster, reading informational text, reading literature. The cluster is key ideas and details. And this is how the students did on it. It's so hard not seeing people's faces. This is, craft and structure. If you're an ELA teacher or if you teach ELA, these should sound familiar. You know that craft and structure is part of what you're teaching when they're reading. This is also part of reading literature, reading informational text. And then you can just look and see how they did. This is another report just like that. It's math. It's the overall math score and each of the clusters. OA is operations and algebraic thinking, numbers in base 10, numbers in fractions. And you could look at this and go, oh my goodness, my students did really well here, but they didn't do so well here. Or look at all the red here. It's a level 4. That's a little scary. So that's how you would look at this high level report. This is another report that isn't used very often, and it's a little hard to understand when you first look at it, but it's actually really good to try, because what you can do is compare your NEWA and your interim, or your NEWA and your SAS, your summative, or this is iReady. So your iReady students here, you can see that this is level 1 for iReady. This column here is level 2. This is level 3 right here, and this is level 4. And on this one, for the SAS interim, these are all your level 1s. So this red box here that I'm outlining, were level 1s on both. These students, all of these students in this orange, were level 2 on iReady, but a level 1 on the interim. And that's not so much of a concern there, but when you get to the students who are level 4s for iReady, which is really only this student, then they're not necessarily a level 4 on the SAS or the summative. This is more obvious on the summative. So let's say this is a level 3 on iReady, this whole column, but these two students scored a level 2. So if I were a teacher, my kid gets a level 3 on iReady, I'd probably work with some other students instead, but there's still some missing information for these students. So what this does is just compare the same students taking a different test and see how this tests align. And I think I have another one, but I'm not going to, so I'll skip it. This is a reading one. It's just a good way, a high level look at, ooh, these two tests don't compare, or they do. So those are the high level ones that I look at. There aren't really any other ones that I ever look at. Then these are some reports that you look at, dig into the detail. After we look at these reports, I'm going to show you how you can use them for instruction. But right now I'm just going to show them to you and explain them, how to read them a little bit. So on the portal, you can see how your district or your school class or your students do overall on the test. And you can see what were the strongest or weakest domains. And you can see standards for individual students. But you can't see all my students did on the numbers and operations fractions, did really well or really poorly. You can't see on a cluster when you've got like just 3 standards, how did my students do on that part of the test? On PerformancePLUS, you can see subject scores, domain scores, cluster scores, and then you can see the number of points each student got on a cluster. So if I was taking a math test and one of the clusters was, some fraction standards, 3 or 4 fraction standards under a heading called comparing fractions, I could see that I got 10 questions were offered to me, but I only got 4 right. So it's going to show you the points of those. It's not going to show you the questions, but it'll tell you how many points out of how many points. You can see all the students at once. You can tell which clusters were strong and which were weak. And you can also see one student at a time. So let's talk about looking at the results for instruction. And this is
Anne, can I just interrupt? Sorry.
Yes.
There is a question that came up that this is somebody who uses P+ currently, and all of the interim data and things like that in P+ right now is labeled do not use.
Yes, it is.
I think was that when they were testing it and things like that. And
Yes.
yep,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. And it just hasn't been changed, but it is current data, correct?
It's current, but it's not quite done.
Okay.
So mostly what they have in is the domain scores, but they don't have the cluster scores in yet. Some schools do and some don't. So it varies, but I'll show you what it looks like when they're in there. But yes, they are still called don't use, but you can use them if you want to. So these are the steps that I go through when I'm looking at some data that I want to drill down and figure out what I should work on. And I especially do this with the summatives, but we're talking about the interim. So the first thing I do is look at a high level report to find some trends. Oh, I wrote trends twice. Interesting. Find trends. To do that, I use the comparative report achievement level. So that's the name of the report. It's a comparative report achievement level. Then I choose a cluster to work on. And then I look at my standards document to see what the standards are under that cluster. So I need to, if there's a cluster that I didn't do well, that the students didn't do well on, I have to teach that differently. So I have to know what the standards are that I'm teaching differently. Then I'm going to look at a student level report so that I can group my students. And to do that, I'm going to use an assessment scores report. So I'm going to go through each of them. So use the results for instruction. This is the achievement level comparison. So it's called the comparison results by achievement level is really what it's called. But this heading comes out. So this is the math. We're going to follow this through to determine as a 4th grade teacher what it is that my students need to work on. And you know, always they need to work on everything, but you can't work on everything. For this year, you should work on one thing, one cluster. Next year, work on another cluster or the same cluster, but don't try and change instruction for 5 different clusters. It's too much. You can't, focusing on one will make a difference. So if I look here, these are the words of the clusters. And how did I do? So let me look. You know, I've got a lot of red here, which is a little scary. This one has the most red. So it says using place value understanding and properties operations for multi-digit arithmetic. That sounds pretty important. Sounds like something my kids should be working on. You can see there are some numbers here. These numbers are the number of possible points that a student can get on these clusters on the summative assessment. So for instance, generate and analyze patterns. The most number of points a student can get on that is 2. So there isn't necessarily a reason to work on it right now. It wouldn't be your first place to work. It just isn't going to make that much of a difference in the score. And I hope it means that the SAS, that New Hampshire has chosen this not to be as an important cluster as some others could be. But this is 3 to 6 points. That's, you know, pretty high up there. And the scores are pretty low. So I am going to choose a cluster and I'm going to choose that cluster. It's for NBTE. And that's where the naming convention comes in. And then I can see the words. So next, I bring up my standards page for the 4 NBT, numbers in base 10. I bring over the cluster I was looking for, and they're not marked E on the document. So really what I have to do now is just look for the words. So use place value, there it is. It's this cluster, use place value understanding, use place value understanding. It's these 3 standards, just 3 standards. I need to work on these 3 standards. My students didn't do very well. Don't try and expand it. I mean, you have to work on everything, but to change your planned instruction or to do a major intervention on these 3 standards. The next thing you want to do is, you know what area you want to work on. You looked at the standards, you dug into them and figured out what they meant. And then you have to figure out how the students did on this. So you're going to get an assessment scores report. And this is what that looks like. You've got all your students. You can see these are students here. This is their overall score. And these are their scores on this cluster, NBT4E. I think I brought that over. Yeah, so it's the same one, NBT4E. Yeah, put all these little arrows in. And you can sort it. I sorted this one so that all of the overall scores sorted. Hi, Karen. Karen, we have a webinar going. So this is level 4. See Karen's face there, she popped in. All the students who scored a level 4 in blue, level 3, and then it goes on to 2s and 1s. And you can see that these are 2s and 1s and 4s and 3s and whatever they are. You can also sort it by this. So if you click here, it'll sort by score. These are low, the next level, and the next level. From this, I might be able to choose which students, like these students might be the worst on this cluster. They did all right, this is a level 3, but on this particular cluster, they need work. Here's level 4s, but on this particular cluster, these students need work. I'm going to go back to this one. Chances are your if you're looking at math scores, the math program doesn't cover this information sufficiently. And that's why the students didn't do well on it. So if you follow the math program without really understanding the standards, then the students aren't going to be able to really dig in and do the depth of the questions that the standards require. So now, okay, so I've shown you the reports. I've shown you how to dig into them. And then I want to show you what the scores mean. So you get a subject score. And I think we all know this because this has been true forever. You get a level 1, 2, 3, or 4, below proficient, approaching, proficient, or above proficient. That's always been true. And this is what it might look like on an assessment scores report. These are level 4s for blue, greens are level 3s, level 2s, and level 1s. Then the next we're going to look at, you can get cluster scores. And the clusters are you only get 3 scores. You can either be below, at or near, or above. So if you look here, these are the cluster scores, which there's no blue. And that's always a panic. It's like, oh my gosh, there's no blue. But there is no blue. You can't get blue. You only can get 3 levels. And if you want an explanation for that, well, I'll just give it to you. So here, I think I even have a slide. So when you have 4 levels, when you have 30 questions or 50 questions, you can pretty well tell where a student falls in their knowledge about math. They're a level 4, 3, 2, or a 1. You can divide them that way. But when there are only 10 questions for each cluster, you can't be quite as sure. So, the people way over on this end are above and the people way down here are below. But this whole group in the middle is kind of, we don't know, they're better than high. They're better than low. They're not quite as high. But on this cluster, we're not exactly sure where they fall. But they could be at this end or they could be at this end. So just because it says at or near doesn't mean that they're really doing super well. So you have to be really careful about that. That's when you're looking on the portal too. If it says approaching, that's this middle group. And that they're not necessarily doing that well. They could be way down here. So make sure you watch that carefully. Now, when we get to the clusters, this is how they're scored. You either get, I'm not going to read them all, but you get one of these ranges. And the way that's decided is it's the number of points that you got correct over the number of points you were offered for that cluster. So if there was one question or 1 point, and I answered it correctly, I would have 100%. If there was one question and I answered it incorrectly, I would have a 0. If there were 5 questions and I answered 3 of them correctly, yeah, I should have picked something a little easier to figure out. How about 4 questions? And I answered 3 of them correctly, that would be a 75%. I'd be here. 2 of them correctly, I'd be here, which is information and it's good. So here are the clusters and here are the points. So this student was low. He got 2 points right out of 8 points or questions, 2 out of 7. So look at what that did. This student they both answered 2 questions correctly, but since he got 8, he was lower. Since this person got 2 out of 7, he was a little higher. This one was 0 out of 7. Is 2 out of 7 that much better? I don't, you got to be careful about that, how that works for each student. And here's some more examples. So here's a student that got 2 out of 2 for 100, so they're in the level 4, I mean, the high level. And here's a student who answered 2 correctly, but out of 5. So they are a level 2. So here's a 1 out of 1. They only answered 1 correctly and so they're 100%. And it really has to do with the importance of the cluster. You're not going to get 5 questions on a cluster that isn't a major cluster. You might get 1 or 2. So make sure you're looking at major clusters when you're looking at this data. Please ask questions about that because that part can be very confusing. Any questions on that? No?
No questions.
Good. So again, this is just sort of wrap up ELA for the overall subject. You've got 4 levels. Domains, you've only got 3. And for the clusters, you have it's based on the number of points. So that's the overall. Now I'm going to show you how to create these reports. So anybody who was here to learn how to create reports will do that. And we probably will have time to go live, but I'm going to go through these first. If you wanted to create this report, you've got 2 assessments here, and they're both for the same year. So what I want to do is, I'm sorry. I'm going to show you how to create that report, this report, and this one. This is the P+ homepage. If you've used P+ lately, then you recognize it. If it's been a couple years, you might still recognize it because it hasn't changed. But if you've never used it, this is the homepage. These are the menu items. This one is reporting. So this is where we're going to go today, to the reporting. When you're here, it actually tells you the steps you have to go through to create a report. So the first thing I want to do is, what type of report do you want to create? Do you want to create the comparative report? Do you want the assessment scores report? Do you want to compare standards? Do you want to compare achievement? So you have to choose the type of report you want. And that's here. Then you have to choose what data do you want in this report? You want 3rd graders or 4th graders, or 3rd graders from 3 years ago, 3rd graders from one school compared to another school. So you have to then tell it what you want in the report. Step 3 is you can put some options. Do I want the students SAS? Do I want their school? Do I want to list the grade in the report? Each report has its own set of options. And then I run, which of course sounds simple. If you've ever tried to do it, it's not always that simple. But let's go through one. So the first thing I do is click on reports, and up come these 2. Any of the reports in here will give you overall scores. Down here, you can actually look at question level data if your assessment has question levels. So the SAS doesn't have question. iReady, NEWA, none of those have questions. The ones that have question data are really the local ones. If you have written your own assessment, you can put in results by question. You can say, oh my gosh, everybody got 13 and 14 right. Yeah, that's great. Everybody got 9 and 10 wrong. Every single kid in the class. Then you can decide what went wrong. But so that's what these are for. We're going to look at the performance tracker for the ones we're going to look at today. These are your choices. There are a whole bunch. First one, we're going to look at that any 2 scatter plot. So I check it. Then I have step 2. What do I want to put in there? Open it up. I have to choose the assessments. Which assessments do I want to look at? I can put these filters in and narrow it down, or I can just click on show assessments. It's kind of nice to narrow them down a little bit, but you don't have to put everything in here. If you click show assessments, you could get 100 assessments because you'll get all grades, all subjects, everything. So it's nice to narrow it down a little bit. But then you have to click show assessments. And up comes the list of assessments. So I put in, I wanted the interim assessments. I'm going to actually go back to that. This one, you have to put this in. If you're going to create this report, choose this to narrow it down. Make sure that the series is NH SAS Interim. And and I even chose math. So just math assessments are going to show up. Here's the do not use that the person mentioned before, but they will fix that eventually. I can see that this is the 4th grade assessment, but remember, this will be my 5th grade students. This was the approximate date. It isn't necessarily the date that it was taken. What grade, what subject hasn't been scored. You wouldn't see it if it hadn't been, so I'm not exactly sure what that is. And about how many students have is their data for. It will say 50, under 10, 100, 200. It doesn't say 103. And is there item level data? No, there is not for this test. So let's say we want to look at the 5th grade math. So I click on that. Now I want to compare the 5th grade NEWA. So I change that series to NEWA, check the 5th grade NEWA for the spring, fall, I guess. Oh yeah, because it was fall. Show assessments, these will come up, and choose that. And you can see now, here's my list. When I show assessments, this is the list, but these are the 2 I've chosen. Now, I also want to choose a school building because let's say that I have access to more than one school. I don't want to see the score for all my 5th grade schools. I just want to see for my school. So I could go into school. It will have your district here, and you can filter by elementary if you want to, but your school will come up and you can check it. And then you're going to see math and NEWA in this report. And there are options. If I click on options, there aren't very many options here. For this particular report, the NE2 scatter plot, I never even do anything with these options. So then I run it. And here it is. I'm not going to show it. We already talked about the report, but very, very, very often I run the report. I'm not quite sure I've got everything I want, but I run it anyway. And then I see if I have what I want. All right, now we're going to go to this report. So I'm going to show you how to get this for the interim assessment. So this sample is 4th grade math. First thing you do is what kind of report? This is called a comparative report, achievement levels. There's this comparative report standards, but you want the achievement levels. What do I want in the report? Oh my goodness, what is that? Sorry. There's 2 versions here, sorry. So what a mess. Hold on. I have to fix that. It's going to bug me. Get rid of this. Sorry about that. So what do I want in the report? I'm on the assessment section under filters. I put all this information in and I'm choosing 4th grade math. That's what I want to see. Next, I have some options. Do I want to see the numbers or the percents of students? Actually, for this particular report, I also never go into options. I don't usually change them. Oh, that's not true. I want to compare by assessment. I could compare by cluster. I could compare by building, but I want to compare the 2 assessments, the NEWA and the SAS interim, and then I run it. Oh, that didn't work. I'm going to go back. I'm just comparing the assessment. I made a mistake. I'm not comparing the NEWA. So I run it, and this is what I get. And there's just so much. It's too much. So I've got overall total, operations and algebra, and then all these little details. It's too much. I don't want to see all this. So this is an example of, I just ran it to see what I got, but I don't like it. So I'm going to go back into the assessments. And down here where it shows the assessment I chose, I'm going to just choose a few of the pieces to look at. And then I'm going to run it. Much more manageable. So now I can see just overall and the standards related to operations and algebraic thinking. And then this is the detail report that you have to do. I'll do these live in a minute and show you if you have questions. So this is the assessment scores report. So this shows how each student did. Again, start with the reports, choose assessment scores, click on filters and determine which, put the choices in, show assessments, choose the one you want. And this will show up in selected assessments. This I do use options for. I think I put a billion arrows in here, sorry. Do I want student code or not student code? Do I want to show the building or not show the building? I've got to make all these choices here. Teachers or no teachers. You do want to show the scoring notes for this report because that's where the points show up. I like to change both of these to all. So my headings have all the words. They don't only have 6 letters of the title or 6 letters of the cluster. So I just change both of those to all. And I get this. And this, these would have student names and stuff, but yuck, that's not good enough. I need a little more detail than that. So I go back to filters and I click on this sign, the minus sign, or actually it's a plus sign. And then I just want to see the fraction standards. So I click on NF, NF, and NF, and I run it again. And now I just see the fraction standards, fraction clusters. Does that make sense? I can go live.
There's not any questions. Nope, no questions. So
all right,
go for it.
I'm going to go live, which is always a little scary to me because I never know how the system's going to work. I think I can use this version. So here's my home screen. Here's the reports. Let's create the assessment scores because that's usually the one. The first thing I have to do is select the report type. So I want assessment scores. Let's get that. And then I want, what do I want? I want to look at, this is a fake database. So sometimes there isn't data that shows up. I want to look at my 4th grade this year math, or let's do ELA. And I want to pick the series, and it's the NH SAS Interim. Otherwise I get too many. Actually, I'll show you that. What happens. You don't have to change these at all. You can leave them the way they are. If I leave them all the way they are, it'll, it's probably, I've got all of these assessments. Actually, this one, that's really not that many because it's just this year. But I definitely know I want ELA. I know I want 4th grade. And I know I want the New Hampshire SAS Interim. So this will narrow it down quite a bit. So this actually, it's 4th grade to unspecified. If I had said only 4th grade, it would have only given me 4th, over 1,000. So I'm going to check that. That's the data I want to look at. But I don't want to look at every single cluster. Let's just say I want to look at the overall score and things about reading literature. So this is an overall score for reading literature. But I'm more interested in the detail. So I'm just going to pick the detail. And then I run it. And here's a million scores in here. So, oh, see, I don't like this because, oh man, I can't see what the title of this is. I didn't say all. So I'm going to go back to options. I'm going to choose all. And I'm going to run it again. So now I can read the whole thing. And I can sort. Yeah, I can sort. There's so many kids that it's going to take a minute. I can sort high to low. So some without any. Oh, an error has occurred. Who knows what that means? It's just there are too many kids in this. So that's how you create that report. I mean, if there's now, I guess I don't have a lot more to say about this. So I will, if somebody wants a specific report, like you want to compare 2 things or compare, I mean, one thing that's always useful is to compare how a student did 1 year versus the year before. If anybody wants to see something like that. So please put in the question box anything that you would like to see, and I'll try and do it with this test database.
And there is a question about how you get a username and password for PerformancePLUS.
I think, let me go, I think this is not the PerformancePLUS that we use. This is how I get to it. I go to my DOE and then I click on that. You can create an account. If that doesn't work, I would go to your tech person at your school or your principal. And if you are a principal asking the question, definitely the tech person.
Yep, and you would have a username and password as long as you're a P+ subscriber.
Right.
So you may not be, which is maybe why you don't have that on your screen. But let us know if for some reason you are and you still need some help. But again, your administrator would be probably the person to ask. Another person is asking, how is the data from NEWA and DIBBLES entered into P+?
NEWA, they actually send it. If you have NEWA and you also have P+, and you would like to have it sent, oh, I should have copied those. There is a form that has to be filled out. At the end of this webinar, we're going to send you a folder that has the PowerPoint in it and anything else. And I'll put the document that you have to fill out, and it has to go to NEWA. You just have to tell NEWA that it's okay to send the data. But that's automatic. DIBBLES, I think, is also automatic. One of those national assessments, I think it's F&P actually, is you have to put it in yourself because you score it yourself. So you have to put the data in yourself. But DIBBLES, I think, is automatic. I'll find the documents. Other questions?
Not at this time.
It would be interesting to compare. Some, schools have taken the NEWA already. So let's see if we have data in this pretend database. Compare this year's NEWA, like the fall NEWA, to the spring NEWA for the same students. So let's say I want to create, it's an assessment scores report. And I want, which assessments do I want to put in there? I want to put the NH SAS interims for, let's say, all right, this is going to get confusing because of the grades, but so for 4th grade, and people do NEWA for math and ELA, but let's just take the ELA. So these are my 5th grade students. That's not what I said. I said NEWA, didn't I? NEWA for both. So I'm not going to take that. Did my students take NEWA? Okay, here's some. Science, ELA. These are some scores from, these are actually real scores, just everybody's name is John Smith. So then actually, I don't think that's what it's called. Is language, or is it called reading? It's reading, right? So let's take the 4th grade reading. Where is it? Out of order? Actually, it's my fifth. So it's right. Tell me if this is right, Heather. It's this year's 5th grade compared in the fall compared to the last year's spring. So I'm going to get rid of this one. This year's 5th grade. So now I want to go to last year's spring NEWA. Hopefully the same students are out there. So I have to go back a year. This is usually the biggest problem when you're creating reports. It's the date. So now I want the 4th grade students for NEWA for last year. Getting the data. Okay, so language, math, science. Okay, reading for 4th grade. Let's see if there are any. Hopefully there are. But I don't want fall, do I? I'm going to change this so that it says reading. So we'll only bring the reading scores up. And I'm going to look for the spring NEWA reading. Getting data.
Did they do spring NEWAs last year?
Oh, that's a good question. Of course they did not.
Right, that's where I was thinking fall to fall.
Of course they didn't. Yes, okay. So we'll do fall. Fall reading grade 4. Is that right? So 5th grade, yes. So let's just try it and see if we get anybody. There's a couple. Oh, no, it's going to be, I'm going to sort by this so we can see. So these are the people. This is last year's. I didn't pick all, you can see, but this is last year. I could change the title. And this is this year. So this student went up. This student went way up. This student went down a little. So that's a good thing to use for comparing. This one went way up. So you can combine years. You could go back another year too and see how the student's doing. What else can I show you? Anything? I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and I'm going to go to the page that shows you the steps to use the data for instruction. If I can find it. Yeah, it's way back here. Nope. This data is very useful. Didn't I have the steps? Yes. The thing that scares me a little is it's third grade. You know, it's the prior grade, so we don't want to spend too much time on the prior grade. You know, pretty soon, like, you know, January. Where is this? I can't find the steps. Sorry. You don't want to spend too much time on the prior grade data. Here it is. But you do want to look at it. And especially if the kids who are really struggling, it would be useful to get this information. Once we get the summatives, the information is really useful in a different way. Not so much to look at each student and put them into groups. But the thing that's really interesting is when you look at a comparative report from year to year, you could, let's say this was the lowest one this year, or this was the lowest one this year. It's going to be the lowest one last year, and it's going to be the lowest one the year before, and the lowest one the year before. That's where teachers have to take a look at what's happening in what they're instructing. Because that's where, if this is low every year, it doesn't matter what the student, who the students are, then there's something about the instruction that's not right. And that should be looked at. The instruction should be changed. Probably you have to dig into the standards a little more deeply.
Just a quick question, and there's somebody who's looking, where do they find the SAS interim parent report to send home? And I believe that one's actually on the portal rather than in P+. But is there a version in P+ that folks can use, or would you recommend the portal for that?
There is not a version on the portal. So, I mean, on P+. Can I show you after we make sure there are no more P+ questions, and I'll show you how to get that on SAS, unless a bunch of people want to see it. Are there any other?
There aren't any other questions specifically for P+. That was the last.
All right, I'll go through this and then we'll go back to the, got to go all the way to the end. And then we'll go back and look at the portal if you want. So I'm going to go to the bottom. Oh, there are a lot of slides. Who made this? Okay. So now we've got questions and wrap up. The biggest thing is, this is Mike Schwartz actually put this together. The biggest reporting tip: don't struggle with creating these reports. Just call us and ask us, or send us an email and we'll walk you through it. So don't sit there and struggle unless you like to do that, but definitely call us. We have a bunch of other webinars that are coming up and that have happened. These are in the future. Tomorrow we're doing reassessing and celebrating growth for PLCs. Then on the 10th, Heather's going to do one on the P+ student page, which is great, especially for special ed teachers and Title I teachers. I mean, that's not true. It's really great for everybody, actually. But they're great when you're talking about one student in particular. You can look at his history and get a lot of information. Then we're going to talk about creating your own framework. So if you have your own assessments, you can put your own data in there. And then on the January 19th, we're going to talk about the SAT data. So if you're a high school, that would be good. The SAT data to inform instruction. We also have quite a few webinars that we put out there since the pandemic started. And you can go just scroll down on that page and you'll see lots of webinars. You can also go to our YouTube page and find all of our webinars recorded, including this one. You can follow us on any of these platforms if you'd like. And we're constantly putting out tips and white pages on different topics, and sometimes coupons for teachers. So definitely check us out. And this is our information. So take it down and use it, because we'll definitely, please call us or write to us if you have questions. So if there aren't any more P+ questions, I will go back to the I can show you some stuff on the SAS. I can't go all the way in because I don't have a test version of that system. So I will go there. So here's the SAS portal. I'm going to go into test administration, and then down here is reporting. Log on. Oh, of course, it has to send me an email. Okay. And you won't have this, but I have to pick a district, so I don't know. Pick Portsmouth, continue. And this is the reporting page. So you have to dig down to the students and then use this. I can't do it because I can't show you their data. And then you have to use download student results and pick student individual, what is it? It's individual student report. And you can have all the students in one PDF or many different PDFs. And you can either get the simple one or the detailed one. But you have to choose different things. So that's how you get to the parent report. I can't do it for you, but that's how you get to it. Once you generate it, it will be in your inbox.
So Donna, we can reach out to you if you need any help individually with that. We have your information anyway on our New Hampshire SAS Interim and Modular list. So if you would like anything further, you can email either Anne or I, and we can help you walk you through getting those reports and things like that.
And if you want any help picking out particular topics that your school or your grade should be working on, or which students might need some help in which topic, please call us and we'll help you dig down with that information, because it's a lot of information I just spouted out to you. So, but this PowerPoint will be on in the folder we send you a link to tomorrow, so that you will be able to follow it again and try and make your own reports. So if there's nothing else, no more questions? Heather? No questions, I guess.
No,
So
there's no more questions.
okay. Yeah, let us know and we'll be here. So give us a call. I'll stay on for a minute. If you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you and you can ask a question directly. Otherwise, we'll just stay on and for another minute or two. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. That's it. There's no other people besides us, Anne. So
Yeah.
all right.
That was
You want to
boring.
stop recording?
Oh yeah. Where is the recording?
I can do it.
Okay. And